good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I am Deb Maroney, and I am one of the co-leads of the Readiness Projects. This is the second of a 5-week series where we're tackling thorny issues. This week, we're tackling the thorny issue of empowering the essential adults that work directly with young people and their families. We have a great lineup to talk about that. First in a group panel conversation, and then following in breakouts. Today's session will be recorded for your use along with related resources on our Readiness Projects community on Mobilize, which you should definitely check out if you're not already on there. Because we are a community, we encourage you to chat in the chat box. We'll be able to respond to you there and also in the breakout sessions after. We are not going to have a formal Q&A in this larger group session, but we'll have a great chance in the breakouts to discuss your questions and comments and suggestions. So let's start out by being a community. Please make sure that your webcams, if you can do it, are on review because we have great speakers here today and we want all of them. And please introduce yourself in the chat box. Tell us who you are, where you're located, what program, school, or organization you work with. We really look forward to chatting today. And with that, I'm going to invite Karen Pittman and our panelists to join me on the video screen.
Hi, Deb. How are you?
Good, Karen.
Great to be back with all of you. I know as we're all getting ready for the Thanksgiving weekend, whatever that means for us, such an important topic that we're going to be zooming into today. So I won't take very long to set this up, except to say that for the past year plus, we've really been using this mantra of all adults, all settings, all learners. And today we really want to zoom in, not just to sort of be more specific about naming who all those adults are, but asking specifically, what do we do to really support the adults who are working with our young people, working with families who are not in the classroom? This in no way takes away from the important role that teachers play, but very often in conversations, we associate learning with teachers and with formal classrooms. And what we know from the science is the power that all of these adults carry. And what we know from our colleagues that you're going to hear from today, just as a sampling, both in the main stage and in the breakouts, is that there's an incredible amount of intentionality going on about how to really make sure that adults have these practices that they need to really leverage and optimize learning experiences in all kinds of settings, from classrooms to cafeterias to camps to parks to arts programs. There are places where young people are showing up and learning, and we know relationships and experiences are what's driving development. So how do we really make sure that the adults have the supports they need? We're going to be focusing on that today. Just a couple of reminders of why this is such an important topic to dig into is half of the adults in school buildings are not in classrooms. That's from a study that Forbes did a couple years ago. So many adults, whether those are counselors, librarians, bus drivers, security guards, all of these folks are in the building. They have relationships with young people, and we need to acknowledge that and figure out how to leverage it. We also know that when young people leave the buildings, the majority of them are going someplace. And learning is happening in those places. And a lot of those places are taking real responsibility for learning. For the 74 million young people who are coming out, if we sort of go with the blog, who are coming out of schools, a lot of them are going off to, they may be going to a part-time job. They may be going to the library. They're going places where learning happens. And a lot of them are going to places where you've got organizations that have taken responsibility for creating opportunities 4 or 5 days a week consistently. We call those after-school programs. And we know that about 10 million young people are in those programs. And we know that for every young person that's in one of those programs, there are 2 that are waiting to get in. So we've got these incredible spaces. We've got adults who are being trained and supported, and we need to learn more about what it takes to support them, as well as support the coaches and the other folks who are working with young people in more sort of one-off ways that are not 3 days a week. We've got a new report coming out from the After School Alliance. You'll hear more about them later on December 8th, just telling us an update on what the demand is for after school programs. But right now, I just want to get it back to Deb to facilitate this incredible panel and just help us understand what it takes to really optimize learning and development in all of the settings where young people spend their time, by focusing on the adults and having those adults really be able to say, what's unique about this setting? What's unique about this group of young people? And how do I put those things together to really optimize? And for those of you who were here last week, we'll keep referring to that blue wheel. We won't put it up on the screen today, but every opportunity that young people have to come together with their peers and with adults is an opportunity for us to come in one of those doors, come in the relationship door, come in the supports door, come in the rich instruction door, come in that we're going to focus in on competencies door. Lots of doors to come in, but the bottom line is we don't optimize learning until adults understand the importance of paying attention to all of those non-negotiables. So the question today is, how do we get this critical information to adults? With that, I'm handing it over to Deb, and I will take myself off camera and be a great active listener. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Karen, for the great introduction and the bridge from last week to this week. So as Karen moves off the screen, I'm going to invite our panelists on the screen. We have a rock star panel today of champions for all adults in all settings, the exact settings that Karen just talked about. So we have Meg Pittman from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Elizabeth Cushing from Playworks, and Alea Rosario with the California After School Network. We're going to be dropping their bios in the chat boxes because there's so many great things we can say about this panel, and you can learn more about them here. But first, I'm going to ask them to sort of just reflect on what Karen just said, the variety and unique spaces that adults work in your environment. So Meg works with a, sort of household name youth development organization. Elizabeth works with an organization that uniquely partners with schools to bolster recess, and she'll talk more eloquently about it than I just did. And Alea works to support the workforce, the after-school workforce in California and nationally. And so I'd love for us to just go ahead and start with Elizabeth. And if you can share a little bit more about Playworks and how you uniquely support adults in the settings where Playworks exists.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be amongst friends who care so much about young people across the country. So Playworks, like so many of you, relies on the well-known practices of high-quality youth development, a caring, consistent adult, emphasis on the kids' assets and strengths, their potential to do our work. We base our guiding principle for us. One is the power of play to bring out the best in every kid. And while that statement might sound kind of trite, it means we wholeheartedly believe there is a best in every kid and that it's the job of the grown-ups to bring that best out. So as we were designing our way of supporting kids almost 25 years ago now, we realized two things that are that we might uniquely be able to do using kickball and foursquare and wall ball and tag. And those two things are that there is a time in the school day that could be used to actually promote social emotional learning and to promote relationships between kids and between adults and kids, and that's recess. And then the second thing we realized, and I say we when really it was Jill Violet, our founder, who figured this out, that there's a problem that schools have that we could help solve. And by helping solve their problem, we could enter that ecosystem of schools and do the great youth development work that we do. So and that is the chaos and negative behavior at recess that was really getting in the way of learning. So we partner with schools. We have a very simple, but maybe unique approach to teaching play and setting positive norms, using high fives, using Rochambeau to resolve conflicts. It turns out that by intentionally focusing on how we play, which is probably pretty similar to how most of you play with kids in the out of school time, by intentionally focusing on it, we could decrease bullying, we could decrease discipline referrals, we could increase a sense of safety amongst students and belonging, and ultimately, honestly, change the way some of the teachers see their students because they see them as positive leaders in an environment where kids feel like they have mastery. They have mastery over tag and foursquare differently than they do math and reading, maybe. So that's the impact that we have. Absolutely, what we do is transferable to to any adult working with kids in any environment. Play is a way to build relationships, build trust. It is a way to have some fun. It's also a way to inspire kids to want to be there with you. So kids feel more excited about going to school in a place where they know they're going to get to have recess and be included in that recess. So we definitely focus on supporting those adults with experiential learning. We all learn by doing, by playing together, and by demonstrating that. And I think that the current situation with schools and kids, and what we think may happen next year, when we hope kids and adults go back to school in a more consistent way, is that there's an opportunity for all of us who know how to build relationships with kids to infuse that into the school day. So I'm excited to talk about that in the breakout session, and to talk about a partnership we have going with Meg over at Boys and Girls Club that's demonstrating how to do that. So I'll stop there, and we can talk more later.
That's awesome. I have one really specific question I want to ask Elizabeth before we move on to Meg. You mentioned supporting teachers and training teachers in your model. Is it just the teachers, Elizabeth, who get support from Playworks?
No, it's the whole.
Parents talked about all these adults in the school.
All the school staff who both learn by being out at recess with us. We also provide training to a school community when we enter it on the basic foundational practices of what we do. I have to say, I think the biggest source of inspiration for those adults to start using our high fives and Rochambeau is they see the kids doing it. They see the joy on their faces, and they start to realize that something different is going on, and they get curious. So as much as we're able to inspire that curiosity, then the adults start to try our stuff on.
They start to buy in. Yeah, I'm thinking about that Rochambeau tactic at work.
Oh no, I use it with my kids all the time. That's how we figure out who's unloading the dishwasher.
Yeah. Right on. All right. So Meg, Elizabeth mentioned your partnership. Why don't you start out with helping us to understand who you are and what you do and how you uniquely support the adults in your setting, and then we want to know the secret sauce in your partnership with.
Okay, cool. So Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and I know the name, and I think I know what you do, and so we are sort of a household name. We are 5,200 sites around the country. We're in native lands and military bases and rural communities, and we're probably best known for being in major cities, so inner city hubs. That's been our jam for about over 100 years. And then, we're great generalists. So we're the after school program that kids come to. We have sports and academic support. Social emotional stuff is starting to be in our bailiwick. And I'm pointing to Elizabeth because they're really helping us get deeper in that space. We'll note that over 50% of our sites are in school settings. So that's a new statistic from last year. We went over the tipping point. So we're not just standalone buildings anymore. We are actually in school sites. And so that's been a fun new thing and a fun new focus for us to try and get a little more relevant to what teachers need and helping them. My partner's a teacher, and I know how hard that job is. And it's always like, oh, if I had, and I'm like, oh, if you had a Boys and Girls Club, you'd be have the secret sauce. So, or the science sauce, as I like to take it. So and then recently, in the past 3 years, we really dug down on quality because we had massive scale, for youth who need you most is only good if you have quality programs. So we started to see a shift from our funders. Like, yes, programs are good to fund, but programs are only as good as the staff who run them. Most of our staff who run them, a lot of our staff are kids who have come up through the club through workforce development programs, and now they're hanging out 18 to 26 as staff in our school and in our clubs. So we needed them to be on point and to really, really know what it was that made kids connect to a curriculum. So last 3 years, quality's been our focus. We've been hanging out with Weikart and really making sure that quality included getting the voices of the staff who are doing the work at the table to make the decisions about how their programs could be improved. And we saw some really cool stuff, like staff retention went way up, and we know that's great for kids. Staff felt valued, they felt seen, and we saw some shifts in our CEOs who started with the quality work to become really fun and really understand that their staff, they should provide their staff with the experience their staff expect their kids to have. So we saw this real clear line of sight between supporting staff and staff who are supported having way more support and intentional work with kids.
That's great. Thank you. And I think what we could do, I know this is a little shift from what we talked about, but I'd love for you and Elizabeth to describe last week for those who attended, we talked a lot about the ecosystem and the ecosystem of supports for young people, but certainly the adults are in and needing and thriving in that ecosystem as well. Can you talk a little bit about your partnership and the impact on both programs and schools? And then I think we'll shift over to Alea to take a step back and talk about the workforce.
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
I'll let Elizabeth start because she was the spark.
Well, we know that the kids are in schools and they're in out of school time programs. They are in all of those aspects of the ecosystem. And it seemed surprising, I guess, to us over at Playworks, what a barrier there seemed to be between the adults who were supporting them during the school day and the adults not during the school day. Especially because we do operate very much like a Boys and Girls Club. If you watch one of our staffers and one of Meg's staffers, I got to tell you, they look exactly the same. They're using the same practices. And so it occurred to us, Playworks is, serving 1,000 schools or more this year, but we're not serving all 35,000 elementary schools. And it occurred to us that what mattered to us more than being the biggest organization was making sure safe and healthy play was happening in as many schools as possible. And given Boys and Girls Clubs overlapping footprint with schools and our mission alignment, it seemed like there was an opportunity there. So what we're doing is partnering with a club, a school, and Playworks, and we are serving that school at recess, where the staff person serving the school is a Boys and Girls Club staffer who's being trained by Playworks. The school's getting the same impact they would get from a play worker doing it. The Boys and Girls Club staffer is getting the professional development that we provide. They're building relationships with kids in the school who are then able to be invited into the club after school. And then we know that Playworks practices work well in a club environment too. So everybody is getting something that is, and we're joining hands to serve the kids. It's those teachers want the same thing for the kids that Meg and I want for the kids. And so by combining our superpowers into one partnership, we're able to help everybody achieve their goals and their mission. And it is our intention, we're doing this in 6 places across the country right now. It is our intention to expand this partnership as quickly as we're able to, because it's working so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's working so well in terms of adding so much intentionality to the work that we do. Playworks is so good at naming the social emotional in the fun space and really breaking that down. So we've seen it level that practice up. And then we've seen it make part-time staffers all of a sudden full-time staffers and that's good for the workforce, right? Because now they're in schools helping with recess, and they've got hours in the afternoon hanging out with us. So the continuity is really cool.
That is a great example of a partnership and not just a collaboration. That was a nuance that someone mentioned in the session last week. And I think as we think about these ecosystemic approaches, it's easy to say we should all work together, but we know, and we heard, and Meg, you said your partner is an educator, that teachers and school leaders right now are really wanting to respond to how, this fundamental question of how are children and family doing? And the out of school time field, which I'm associated, myself with, says we can help with that. But making that happen in this way is really unique. And it seems like Playworks has provided this sort of great link there.
Yeah, Deb, can I just say one thing about what I think is making this work? Besides the fact that I love Meg, I think
what's not to love?
What's making this work is that the basis of the conversations was not what's in it for me.
Yes.
Well, the basis of the conversations was, what are the schools really need. And I have to say the needs that our schools are going to have as the next few months progress are only going to increase. And what is the need that Boys and Girls Clubs has? And we really aligned with the help of our friends at Bechtel who helped us build these relationships. We really aligned to the priority strategies of improving the quality experience for kids and increasing the number of kids going to clubs. And when we thought about how can we help with that and achieve Playworks mission, it was pretty obvious. And I think that mindset's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And a lot of the things you're saying, I just want to point out, are in the blue wheel that we've talked about: relational trust and safe and supportive settings, but between organizations and between adults, right? Which I think is great. Okay, so we let this good conversation go a little bit, and I'm gonna ask Alea to talk about your work. I'm such a fan of Alea's and have been throughout our parallel careers. And then Alea, if you could share a little bit about what you do and care about. And then we're going to go to the After School Alliance video, and they're going to talk about the workforce. And then I'd like you to go first after that, because I think what you talk about really is a great bookend to that presentation. Does that work for folks? Okay, go
ahead. Sure. Sounds good. It's great to be here and be a part of this conversation. I'm a fan of everyone's here. So, yeah, so I get to be in a space where I think about the workforce all the time. In California, expanded learning includes before school, after school, summer, and intersession programs. There are about 4,500 publicly funded programs across the state. We think that's an estimated 25,000 staff across the state. The thing is, we don't know that for sure because the expanded learning staff are hard to track. There's not sort of a standard kind of occupational agreement on what they are, and so that's part of the challenge that I get to think through with a group of folks from across the state. But I think one of the things that I get most energized around thinking about with partners is how we ensure that the folks and the adults, the young adults especially, that work in our programs get the experiences that Elizabeth and Meg were talking about across the board. And because we know anecdotally and a little bit more, maybe program by program, that the demographics of the young adults that work in these programs reflect the racial, ethnic diversity of the young people being served. And what a great opportunity, right? These programs and this work is sort of easy access to interesting work, right? Where adults get to kind of find their passion, build skills, work collaboratively. And one of the challenges that I've been thinking about for a number of years with lots of other partners is that diversity in staff becomes less and less reflective the higher up leadership positions that you look. And so where are the barriers or the glass ceilings, if you will, that our young, passionate, skilled staff of color are finding as they move along the sort of pipeline? Especially for women and women of color during this time, right? If we look in our programs, you'll see probably mostly women of color. That's one of the great things about this field is that we actually are engaging men also in education, and I'll talk a little bit about that opportunity. But if we think about, how can we ensure that these jobs lead to family sustaining wages, right? So that the young, diverse, mostly women staff are able to work, eventually kind of move to a place of not having to have a second job to continue this work, that they're able to build their career to move up in the field. And again, I think we see this as an opportunity. And I say we because I mentioned earlier, I get to work with a group of statewide stakeholders to develop a strategy. Last year, a group kind of put together a really comprehensive document outlining lots of strategies for the state to support and advance a strong expanded learning workforce. And that included community colleges, that included some of our workforce development partners at the state level, it included state universities, it included, of course, intermediaries and providers. And it's exciting because we're thinking about not only like training and professional development, but how do we increase funding to not only serve more students, but to pay our folks, livable wages. And then we're exploring some really interesting, innovative workforce strategies like apprenticeships, right? And how do we kind of build really clear pathways and step wages, right? That somebody knows that they're going to be kind of getting this training, getting this education in this role. And then when they meet some of these certifications, right, they move up. We're also really interested in exploring connections between increasing teacher diversity, right, and just addressing the teacher shortage by looking at partnerships to really, I'm going to say, utilize work in expanded learning as part of a future educator's clinical hours. That's really emerging work. It takes talk about, partnership and collaboration and trust and flexibility. That's what's needed there. But those are some of the emerging strategies that we're looking at. And I really appreciate the group that I get to work with, focused on how do we not create more barriers, to access by requiring kind of credentials. And we think we can also really strongly, provide the wraparound supports for the adults in the same ways that we expect them to do for young people in the programs, that we can figure that out. We can solve that. It will take resources, right? It will take collaboration, but that's some of what I get to focus on.
Thank you, Alea. And, there's a lot of comments going in the comment boxes and everyone's really excited about everything the panel is saying. So I want to just do one plug that everyone here is doing a breakout. And so they will hear your good feedback and I'll be able to answer your questions. In the meantime, I said video before, it's a live presentation. We're going to switch over to our great friend, Alexis, with the After School Alliance. It's really hard to talk about workforce issues, or impossible to talk about all adults in all settings without recognizing what adults are managing during the pandemic. And the After School Alliance has done these really great short pulse surveys of the field since the pandemic hit, and Alexis so generously came to share with us her most recent findings. So I'm going to jump off screen. The panelists are going to jump off screen. Alexis is going to show her video, and then we're all going to, or not show her video. You have no video. You're going to talk, and then we're all going to come back and talk about this interesting data.
Thanks, Deb. And I'm very excited to be here today talking about some of the research that we at the After School Alliance have been conducting and trying to understand the pressures, challenges, successes, and what the field is doing in response to the coronavirus pandemic and supporting youth and making sure that they have educational opportunities. So we recently released a third survey in a series of surveys we've been conducting since the springtime to take a look at how after-school programs are responding. So you can see here just briefly some of the methodology that we used. We reached out to, we were able to hear back from a fair number of programs in 48 states and Washington, D.C. that helped us understand what the after-school field is currently grappling with. There are a number of slides I'm going to try and get through, but I will just make a quick plug that I am doing a breakout afterwards where we can dive in a little bit more deeply into some of this. So what we do know right now is that after-school programs are largely physically open. And as you can see here, the blue bars are from our Wave 1 survey, which was in the springtime, as schools were beginning to close and we were initially figuring out how do we respond to the pandemic. The orange lines for the summertime, and then the gray lines for currently. So physically open to all students, about 83% of programs are serving all students right now. And that's a rather large jump compared to earlier in the spring. We also know that after-school programs are really stepping up to the challenges and are taking on considerably new roles in order to be able to continue to provide safe spaces for kids and youth during the day. A lot of programs, more than 53%, are providing some kind of supervised learning environment during virtual school days. So they're extending their hours, allowing children to come in, certainly by providing access to computers, access to technology and internet in order to be able to participate in those virtual lessons, but also providing that space for kids to feel safe, to be able to still connect with other children and youth during the days when they may not be in school. And as you can see here, that programs are extending their hours, and that programs that are virtual this fall are twice as likely, or programs that are operating in districts that are completely virtual this fall are twice as likely to extend their hours. So they are providing those spaces for kids to be able to come in. Programs anticipate serving about half the number of students that they reported having served last fall. We know that there is a capacity issue. There's a number of reasons for this. It's involving the space that's available in some communities. If you're trying to do social distancing, you're unfortunately having to reduce the number of students that you're serving. Student to staff ratios may be down as well. So those are some of the factors that are contributing as to why programs are serving fewer students than they typically would be at this time. And that is leading to some significant concerns about trying to reach this new demand. As you can see in the chart here, programs are worried about kids in their communities being able to access after-school programming and what's happening with those that aren't accessing it. And it's particularly prevalent in school districts where programs are closed or schools are closed and programs are trying to provide that support. After-school programs are continuing to serve this fall as well. As we saw in the springtime, many youth development programs were stepping up in additional ways from just providing educational support to children. They've been working on serving students remotely, and they still are this fall, especially as some districts are operating on virtual or hybrid lessons, being able to provide activities where they're sending that out to their community, where they're delivering activities for kids to be able to do virtually or from home. They're serving as meal sites, providing those after-school meals, being able to help support and provide breakfast or lunch, especially if they are open during extended hours during the day, and getting children, especially lower income children, those critical meals that they need, as well as connecting families with community resources. The other thing to note on this slide is that we're also seeing an increase in the number of programs that are providing care for children of essential workers, which is important for those frontline staff, parents that are working, knowing that they have a safe place for their children to go during the school day, during those after school hours, while they are working in critical roles. We do know, though, that access to after school programs is remaining unequal. We found, based on this recent survey, that programs that are more likely to report being physically open are serving mostly serving higher income students. Lower income students are not able to participate in programs right now at that rate. There's a number of potential challenges. Space, again, is an issue. If you're in a district where you're not able to access the school building and it's difficult to find space to have programs, that could be a challenge that is causing some of these programs not to be able to open up and serve the number of students or serve students that they normally would. And as you can see here, there's also some additional factors that are preventing in-person programming. Concerns about health and safety of students and staff, wanting to make sure that we are keeping people safe, that they're not contracting this virus. Those are certainly valid concerns that many communities are facing, and that plays into whether or not programs are able to open. Additionally, as we all know, the situation changes on a daily basis, especially as different communities grapple with what to do as cases begin to increase across the country. So there's ongoing changes happening to school district policies and procedures, which can make it difficult for programs to anticipate how they are going to be serving students. Are they doing it virtually? Are they doing it in person? What do those hours look like? And then a final consideration is lack of appropriate space. Talked to numerous programs over the last couple of weeks, and one thing that has come up continuously is comments on we didn't know what our facilities were actually like, what kind of work they need in terms of ventilation, in terms of being able to have the space to accommodate programs that can serve students and keep them at safe distances. So that is also something that factors into this. Program sustainability continues to be a concern for programs as well. As you can see on the screen here, 64% of program providers are concerned that they may not be able to provide services in person or virtually next fall. There's concerns about funding and whether or not there will be funding to be able to support programs in the future. And programs that are serving mostly families in low-income communities are much more likely to report that they're concerned that they will have to shut their program down versus programs that are serving higher income communities. As you can see, here's some of the uncertainty that remains. And while it's a little less than it was during the summer months, there still is great concern about what the future of our programs will look like. And as you can see here, it's 28% of programs say that they will have to raise parent fees or find new sources of revenue in order to be able to do that if the pandemic continues into 2021, with 17% saying that they will have to shut down their programs. That's a tremendous concern. But not all hope is entirely lost. One of the things that we did find is that 70% of programs say that they're being involved in conversations organized by their school district or individual schools about how to best support their students learning this fall. They're creating community learning hubs. They're opening their doors for longer hours. They're finding ways to partner with their school districts or individual schools in order to be able to provide the necessary services and supports to kids to make sure that they're able to continue learning in a safe environment and be able to have those interactions with other youth during these challenging times. And we do know that 62% of programs are providing or planning to provide a safe, supervised learning environment during virtual school days. So After School is finding ways and is playing a critical role in helping to support education and partnering with schools and being able to continue to provide the high quality youth development programming that we're all accustomed to, even in these challenging times. So I'll turn it back to you, Deb.
Please stay with us. Thank you so much, Alexis. I'm going to invite our other panelists back on the screen, and there's a lot of activity in the chat box. This is really important information. I encourage all of you to use it, respond to it. Alexis is also having a breakout. We just have a little bit of time, and I think one of the things we really wanted to cover, there's a lot to unpack there having to do with young people and families. The focus of this session is on adults, all adults in all settings. And so I'm just going to ask each of the panelists just to take a couple minutes to reflect on what this tells you or prompts you to think about as it relates to some of the equity issues that Alea shared with us prior to the presentation and in your work moving ahead. And I'm going to start with Alea, and then we're going to just transition to Meg and then Elizabeth. Go ahead, Alea.
Sure. So obviously the safety concerns, rise to the top. I think, my experience working in programs, kind of working to support staff, we don't think of ourselves as employers very much, right? Or that we have a labor force. And so I think the idea that staff are, concerned about their safety, concerned about access to PPE, concerned about what the facilities are and how their, safety will be able to be ensured, I think are real issues. And I think again, this idea of recognizing our staff is really great, and sort of recognizing, right, the entire caregiving community, if you will, and the recognition without actual material gains is sentimental. And so that's what I'm concerned about. I think from the PR kind of point where, we're saying the right things, these staff are essential, they're on the front lines, they are expanding access for young people, they're caring for families, and how do we translate that to actual kind of material resources for these people working and for their labor. So that's what I'm thinking about. Of course, funding and resources is always a big issue. And I also wonder about how our organizations can start to make shifts to really think about themselves, to care for their labor force that might remain kind of beyond this pandemic.
Thanks, Alea. Meg?
That's just the perfect setup. So thank you, Alea. So we have been super concerned about the clubs being open in person and this real need that if you're going to be open, it costs 5 times more to serve one kid in a pandemic. Who knew? Well, we didn't have a pandemic to actually play off of before. Where we've seen things go well, then our national office has had some great funders. We have Amber from Altria. I saw her in the mix here. And she was probably the first funder that was like, do not do that program thing because we know what the reality is. We're gonna just pass the money through and clubs can use it to give those material resources to the staff that really are risking. You don't need to raise the service fees if our funders support the work as pass through instead of tagged to something that probably isn't relevant in a pandemic. And so we've seen with funders who have helped and worked with us, funders who understand out of school time, they really get that it's really about that individual practitioner at the front line who want to show up. Like our clubs on Native reservations didn't close for one day. They never closed, right? So they've been open the whole time. And because the pass-through is showing up differently from funders, we're able to give those staff or clubs our hero pay or make sure they have all the PPE they need. And they're able to show up in a safe way for kids consistently and not change the kids they're serving, not make the shift to parents who can pay lots of money to sustain the program where maybe they don't have federal support coming through right now, right? And so it's been really key that the funders have showed up with us in a way that has been responsive, where they know what youth development is, where they know how important it is to kids coming from communities who really do need the support most, because a lot of those parents are your essential workers, right? So for us, it really has been enlightening for us to see the funders who really understand the work have not missed a beat, and our resource development teams got way better at articulating that there is value in supporting the individuals more than you're supporting the box program. And that's what kids need right now, is that space to interact and do the social emotional, and our staff need to be safe and rewarded in that setting.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think one of the things we noticed for our staff and the BGC staff was that they needed training and support for supporting kids online. You may have assumed that we weren't playing tag and Foursquare online, but we are at least playing tag. we had to shift to a whole group of games that could be played via Zoom or whatever platform the school has, and provide training for our people to be able to do that. So that, Rebecca, is what we're doing. The Boys and Girls Club is serving schools in our partnership virtually. I think that there's going to be additional need for training as schools go back. It's just not going to be the same. The level of need for emotional support, for building that sense of belonging and safety, our staff and any youth workers are going to need professional development support for that. So we anticipate having to invest in that ourselves. I'm hopeful potentially that the waiver around 21st century dollars being able to be used for school day work may get extended by the federal government. If that happens, we should be using those dollars to both pay people better and give them the training. Working in schools is just as rewarding as working with kids out of school time. And we can support that environment that where everybody knows that kids are going to need it. So I'm hoping that's something that happens in the next several months.
Thank you, everyone. There's so much we can say here. I just want to harken back to the beginning when Karen talked about all adults in all settings. In the short amount of time, we heard about what programs are doing nationally, what they're doing in partnership with schools and youth development organizations, the sophisticated systems of support for adults in places like California. Like, there's so much great work going on here in this ecosystem. And I encourage all of you to first, let's give a hand to our panelists. I know you're getting a lot of props in the chat box, but then join them in the breakouts. And so we're gonna gracefully pop off screen. Thank you, everyone, and go to your breakouts. And the breakouts descriptions are gonna pop up on your screen. These are all the great breakout sections that are happening right now. And if you look at the chat box, you will find a link. And if you follow that link, it'll take you to links to every one of these breakout sessions. So there's breakout sessions being held on intentional relationships by Tom Akiva, on the potential of a youth workforce survey, how do we attend to the needs of adults? We just heard a lot about that. Investments in the workforce, school community partnerships, thinking about after school and COVID-19 to build forward together. And Alexis will be doing that one, and you can get more information on the After School Alliance data. The principles for whole child design, that blue wheel we keep talking about, you can really dive into that one. And developmental relationships and the teacher classroom default. So please, please join us for those. I'm hoping people are popping off. I'm seeing fewer and fewer participants, but go ahead and navigate to those, the breakout sessions, and dive in a little bit deeper to these conversations. And if you're still with us and listening, you can hang up on me. I'm not offended, but please join us for our next session next week as well on adolescence.